The first thing Ethan Cole felt was warmth. It was not the usual warmth of a blanket or morning sunlight through the thin metal walls of his room. It was heavy, steady, and strangely alive. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. His mind tried to place the sensation. It was almost like someone was lying on him. His eyes slowly opened, and he froze. A face was inches from his. Not a human face, but one that was both strange and beautiful. Her skin had a soft, silver glow, faintly lit like the surface of the moon. Her eyes, large and luminous, seemed to hold an entire night sky within them. Long strands of hair, shimmering with pale light, draped over her shoulders and brushed against his chest. She didn't seem alarmed or embarrassed. In fact, she smiled gently, as if waking up like, this was the most natural thing in the world. "Good morning, Master," she said softly, her voice musical. Ethan blinked hard, his mind racing. Master? He didn't own anyone. He worked as a translator in the colony, living alone in a small quarters. He had never seen her before, and certainly never invited her here. Who are you?" he whispered. "I am Lyra," she replied calmly, still lying on him as if this was her rightful place. "It is a custom in my world to greet a master this way." Her words made no sense. A custom. Ethan tried to move, but she placed a gentle yet firm hand on his chest, keeping him still. Her touch was warm, steady, and strangely comforting. But Ethan's heart was pounding. This was not normal, not safe. Before he could demand answers, a deep, echoing alarm rang out through the colony. The walls seemed to vibrate with the sound. The emergency siren was only used for one thing: an attack. Ethan's eyes widened. Lyra's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened like blades. She rose in a fluid motion, pulling him up with surprising strength. "You must stay with me," she said, her voice low but firm. Ethan stumbled to his feet, still trying to process what was happening. Through the small window, he saw shadows moving across the main street. Figures tall, armored, and carrying weapons were approaching the colony. Buildings, not from the official patrol, not from the colony security. These were outsiders. Mercenaries by the look of their armor. His stomach tightened. "Who are they?" he asked. "They are here for you," Lyra said simply. Her words made him stop breathing for a moment. "For me? I don't even know them," Ethan protested. Lyra's gaze didn't waver. "They know you, and they want what you carry." "I don't carry anything." Ethan's voice was rising. "You do," she said, "but you do not know it yet." Ethan stared at her. But before he could press further, a loud crash came from below. The sound of boots on metal stairs filled the air, growing louder. "They are here," Lyra whispered. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the back of the room. Her movements were quick, precise, like someone trained for this. She opened a panel in the floor, revealing a narrow ladder leading down. "Go," she ordered. Ethan hesitated, but the sound of breaking doors above made the choice for him. He climbed down into darkness, Lyra close behind. The panel closed silently above their heads, just as the intruders burst into his room. In the dim emergency light of the tunnel, Ethan could see Lyra's face more clearly. There was no fear there, only focus. She moved ahead of him, her steps silent despite the metal floor. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked in a hushed tone. "To safety," she said. "And then, I will explain." But he could hear the faint tremor in her voice. Whatever was happening was dangerous, and somehow it was connected to him. The tunnel ended at a small storage bay under the building. The air smelled of oil and dust. Ethan pressed his ear to the wall, hearing footsteps moving above. "They're searching every room," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "They will not find you here, but we must move before more arrive." She paused, scanning the shadows of the bay, her head tilted, listening. Then, without warning, she moved toward a stack of crates. Her hand shot out and pulled something or someone from behind them. Ethan barely saw the intruder before Lyra struck a flash of motion, a dull thud, and the armored figure crumpled silently to the floor. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anyone move like that. She turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "They will keep coming," she said. "And we cannot let them take you." Her eyes locked onto his, glowing faintly in the dim light. "From this moment," she said, "you stay with me always." The bay's far wall shuddered suddenly. A deep, booming sound rolled through the ground. Somewhere above, flames lit the narrow gaps in the ceiling panels. The colony was under full attack now. Ethan's heart pounded harder. He didn't understand why strangers were after him. He didn't understand who Lyra really was. All he knew was that his life had just changed. And there was no going back. The storage bay was quiet, but Ethan could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. Above them, the sounds of boots and shouts were fading, replaced by the distant thud of explosions. Lyra stood near the unconscious intruder, her head tilted as if she was listening to something only she could hear. "They are splitting into smaller teams," she said quietly, "which means they will cover more ground." Ethan shook his head, still trying to make sense of her calm voice in the middle of chaos. "You said they're here for me," Ethan began. "Why? What do they think I have?" Lyra's silver eyes met his, steady and unblinking. "They do not think, they know," she replied. "You carry something they want. Even if you are unaware of it." Ethan opened his mouth to protest again, but the sharp sound of metal scraping above made him freeze. "They're moving to the lower levels," Lyra whispered. "We cannot stay here." She moved to the far end of the bay, where a small maintenance door was half buried under crates. With ease, she slid them aside and opened the door, revealing a narrow passage barely wide enough for one person. "Where does this go?" Ethan asked. "To the old water system tunnels," she answered. "We can reach the east edge of the colony from there." Before Ethan could step through, Lyra's hand shot out, stopping him. She pressed a finger to her lips and nodded toward the shadows. From the darkness of the bay, two figures emerged, mercenaries in dark armor. Moving quietly, their weapons were raised, their helmets scanning with small red targeting lights. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Lyra didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe when the first mercenary turned toward them. She moved like a flash of silver light. Her foot swept the man's legs from under him, her other hand grabbing his weapon before it hit the ground. The second mercenary fired, but Lyra twisted aside, the blast slamming into the wall behind her. She closed the distance in 2 steps and drove her knee into his chest, sending him sprawling. Ethan stared, unable to believe what he'd just seen. She had taken them down faster than he could even process the danger. Lyra tossed him one of their weapons. "Keep this," she said firmly. "If we are separated, you will need it." Ethan gripped the unfamiliar gun awkwardly. "I've never used one of these," he admitted. "Then stay close, and you won't have to," she replied, already moving into the narrow passage. The tunnel was dark and damp, the air heavy with the smell of rust and stagnant water. Ethan followed, trying to keep his steps quiet. Behind them, faint echoes of movement told him the mercenaries were not far behind. "How did you even find me?" he whispered. "I was assigned to you," Lyra answered without turning. "By who?" Ethan asked quickly. "That is not important now," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. Ethan gritted his teeth, frustrated at her half-answers. They reached a junction where the tunnel split into 3 paths. Lyra paused, scanning each one. She touched the wall lightly, then nodded toward the leftmost passage. "This way," she said. Ethan hesitated. "How do you even know where you're going?" "I can hear their footsteps in the other paths," she explained, "and smell the air from the open edge of the colony ahead." Ethan decided not to question her. Further, her senses were clearly beyond human. As they moved, the tunnel grew. Tighter, forcing them to walk sideways. Ethan's shoulder brushed against cold, slimy walls, making his skin crawl. A sudden splash ahead made them both stop. From the darkness, a small drone hovered into view, its scanning lights sweeping toward them before Ethan could react. Lyra pulled him against the wall, her hand covering his mouth. The light passed inches from his face. Then, with a flick of her wrist, Lyra hurled a small blade that pierced the drone's core. It fell to the ground with a hiss, sparks crackling in the water that was close. Ethan breathed once she let him go. Too close, she agreed. They will know the drone is gone and move faster. Her eyes narrowed, and she added, "We have to reach the surface before they trap us inside." Ethan swallowed hard, the reality of the situation pressing down on him. If she was right, the mercenaries weren't just chasing them. They were hunting them with precision. Every path they took, every turn they made, could be their last safe moment. The tunnel finally sloped upward, the air becoming fresher. Lyra slowed, raising her hand for silence. Through the narrow exit ahead, Ethan could see the faint glow of daylight. They crouched low, peeking outside. The east edge of the colony was quieter, but not empty. 2 guards stood by the perimeter wall, scanning the horizon. "They're not with the colony," Lyra murmured. "Mercenaries." Ethan felt the weight of the stolen weapon in his hands. "What do we do?" he whispered. Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "This is the first test," she said softly, "and you will pass it, or we both die." Before Ethan could argue, she was already moving. Her body stayed low. Swift as a shadow, Ethan followed, his pulse pounding. One guard turned, but Lyra was on him in an instant, knocking him silent to the ground. The other raised his weapon toward her. Ethan's fingers tightened on the gun. He fired, the blast striking the man's armor and sending him stumbling back. Lyra finished the job, and for a brief moment, the air was still. Ethan lowered the weapon, his hands trembling. "You did well," Lyra said, glancing at him with approval. But Ethan didn't feel proud. He felt shaken. That was the first time he had fired at someone. And it wouldn't be the last. Without another word, Lyra led him through the open gate. The wild land beyond stretched out in every direction. But so did the danger waiting for them. The land beyond the colony walls felt bigger and emptier than Ethan had ever imagined. The ground was a mix of sharp rocks and dry grass, stretching to jagged cliffs in the distance. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke from the burning buildings behind them. Ethan glanced back once, seeing dark columns rising against the pale sky. It felt wrong to leave the colony, but every step reminded him they had no choice. Lyra walked ahead with quick, sure steps, scanning the horizon. She didn't seem tired, even though they had been moving non-stop since they escaped the mercenaries. Ethan, however, was struggling to keep up. His breath came in short bursts, his legs already aching. Still, he forced himself to stay close. He didn't want to be alone out here. After a while, the silence between them grew heavier. He finally asked, "You said something before about a custom?" Lyra didn't slow, but her voice carried clearly in the wind. "Yes, on my world, it is a sacred act." "What act?" Ethan pressed. "The act of lying upon someone at first light." She replied without hesitation. "It is not affection. It is a vow. A vow." Ethan frowned. "Yes," Lyra said, her eyes fixed forward. "When I woke on you this morning, I declared myself your life bond." Ethan stopped in his tracks. "Life bond? That sounds permanent." "It is," she said simply. "If you die, I die. If you live, I live. Our fates are bound until the end." Ethan felt a cold shiver run through him. "Why would you do that?" "We've never even met before today." Lyra finally turned to face him, her silver hair lifting slightly in the wind. I was sent to you, she said. By who? He demanded. She hesitated, then answered, by someone who believes you are important to my people. Important? I'm just a translator. I work with trade documents, Ethan said, his voice rising in frustration. You are more than that, Lyra replied firmly. You carry something inside you, something my enemies want. Ethan's brow furrowed. I don't have anything inside me except blood and bones. Lyra stepped closer, her gaze locked on him. Look at your arm, she said, confused. Ethan pulled up his sleeve. He froze, faint. Glowing lines ran under his skin, thin as threads, but pulsing softly with light. They were the same color as Lyra's eyes. What is this? He whispered. The mark of my clan. Lyra answered. It appeared when our bond was made. Ethan shook his head. This is insane. I didn't agree to this. Consent is not part of the custom. She said quietly, it is destiny. Her tone wasn't cruel, was matter of fact. Like stating the weather, Ethan felt anger building in him, but also a strange sense of fear if what she was saying was true. His life had just become tied to a war he didn't understand before he could speak again. Lyra's head snapped toward the cliffs. Her eyes narrowed. They found us, she said. Ethan's pulse quickened. How do you know? I can hear their machines, she replied. They're landing more ships ahead of us. Ethan looked around in panic. Then where do we go? Lyra pointed toward a narrow ravine cutting through the rocky ground. There is an old service tunnel there. It might lead us closer to the hills. Without waiting, she started running. Ethan followed, his boots slipping on loose stones. As they neared the ravine, the sound of engines grew louder. Shadows passed over heads. Maul attack. Craft sweeping low. The noise was deafening. The wind from their thrusters whipping dust into Ethan's eyes. Lyra grabbed his hand and pulled him under the cover of a large boulder. Stay low, she ordered. Ethan crouched beside her, his heart racing through the dust. He saw armed figures dropping from the crafts. Moving with military precision, there. Everywhere, Ethan whispered. Yes, Lyra said. Which is why we must not fight here. She waited until the nearest patrol passed, then darted toward the ravine. Ethan followed. Stumbling, but keeping pace, the air in the ravine was cooler, the sunlight barely reaching the bottom. The walls rose high on both sides, giving them cover, but also trapping them in a narrow path. After a few minutes, they reached a rusted hatch. Built into the rock, Lyra pulled it open with a groan of metal. Inside was a dark tunnel sloping downward. This is part of the old mining network, she explained. It's dangerous, but it will hide us. Ethan stepped inside reluctantly. The air smelling of dust and metal. Lyra closed the hatch behind them, sealing them in darkness. Their footsteps echoed as they moved deeper. Ethan's voice broke the silence. If what you're saying is true, if I'm really carrying something, what happens if they catch me? Lyra didn't look at him when she answered. They will remove it from you, she said quietly, and you will not survive the process. Ethan swallowed hard. And you? If you die, she said simply. I die too. Her words hung. In the dark, like a heavy weight, Ethan felt both fear and a strange sense of responsibility. For reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't want her to die. Even if they had met only hours ago, he didn't understand the bond, the marks, or the war she spoke of. But he knew one thing: running was no longer just about saving himself. It was about saving them both. The mining tunnel was cold and damp. Ethan's footsteps echoed softly behind Lyra, who moved with the silent grace of a shadow. The only light came from the faint glow of the marks on Ethan's arm and the occasional spark of her silver eyes. He didn't know how long they had been walking, but every muscle in his body ached. The air felt heavier the deeper they went. Carrying the taste of old stone and rust, suddenly a faint hum filled the air. It grew louder, vibrating through the Walls. Lyra stopped, her head tilting. "They've found another entrance," she said quietly. "They are sending drones into the tunnels." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Then we have to get out of here," he said quickly. Lyra shook her head. "If we rush, they will hear us," she replied. "We must move with the shadows." She guided him into a narrow side passage. The walls closed in until Ethan's shoulders brushed against both sides. His heart was pounding so loud he was sure the drones could hear it. A faint red light flickered. At the far end of the tunnel, Lyra pressed him back against the wall and held up her hand for silence. A hovering drone emerged. Scanning the passage with a beam of cold blue light, Ethan held his breath. The drone passed close enough for him to hear the soft whir of its rotors. Then, with lightning speed, Lyra drew a blade and sliced through its sensor. The drone dropped to the ground with a dull thud. "They will know it's gone," she whispered. "Then what now?" Ethan asked. "We keep moving," she said firmly. They slipped deeper into the network, twisting through paths that felt endless. The hum of more drones followed them. Somewhere behind, the sound of armored boots echoed. The mercenaries had entered the tunnel's 2 minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Ethan's legs burned, his breathing shallow. He nearly stumbled on a loose rock, but Lyra caught his arm before he could fall. "Careful," she murmured. "Noise will kill." "US here." They came to a fork in the tunnel. Lyra paused, listening intently. Then she turned right without a word. Ethan followed, trusting her instincts, even though every step felt like it brought them closer to danger. The right path led upward. The air becoming fresher. Far above, Ethan thought he saw a faint shaft of light. "Are we close to the surface?" he asked hopefully. "Yes," she said, "but so are they." Her words made his pulse quicken. A distant shout echoed from behind, harsh and urgent. "They've spotted our trail," Lyra said sharply, without warning. She broke into a run. Ethan ran after her, his boots pounding against the stone floor. The tunnel widened into a larger chamber filled with rusted mining equipment. Shafts of light streamed through cracks in the ceiling. But before they could reach the far side, figures dropped from above. Mercenaries, at least 6 of them landing. In a half-circle to block their path, Lyra stopped instantly, her eyes narrowing. The leader stepped forward, his voice cold, hand over the human. "And you walk away?" Ethan felt his chest tighten. Lyra shifted her stance slightly, her hand hovering near her weapon. "You'll have to kill me first," she said flatly. The mercenaries raised their rifles in unison. Ethan's grip tightened on the gun she had given him earlier. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. They took him. It was over for both of them. Lyra glanced at him briefly. A silent message passed between them: fight or die. The next moments blurred. Lyra moved first, a silver flash in the dim chamber. She struck the leader's weapon aside and slammed him into the wall. Ethan fired at the nearest mercenary, hitting his shoulder and knocking him back. The air filled with the sharp cracks of energy blasts. Sparks rained from the rusted machinery as shots ricocheted off the metal. One mercenary lunged for Ethan, but Lyra intercepted, her blade catching the man's arm before he could fire. Ethan ducked behind a mining cart, firing again and again until his hands shook. One by one, the mercenaries fell or retreated, the leader bleeding from a cut on his cheek. Growled, "This isn't over," he spat before signaling his men to fall back. They disappeared into the shadows of another tunnel. Ethan leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. His ears rang from the noise. Lyra walked over, unscathed except for a small tear in her sleeve. "You did well," she said simply. Ethan let out a shaky laugh. "Is this what it's going to be like now? Running, fighting, over and over?" "Yes," she replied. "Until we reach the sanctuary." He frowned. "You keep saying that. What is it? A place where no clan, no mercenary, No hunter can touch you, she explained. Ancient laws protect those who cross its gates. Ethan's mind spun with questions. How far is it? 3 days, she answered. If we survive the chase, before Ethan could reply. The hum of engines returned louder now. Closer, Lyra's eyes hardened. They're sending more ships. She said, we must move now. They slipped through another tunnel exit. Emerging into a narrow canyon where the cliffs rose high above, the sunlight here was bright, almost blinding, somewhere far behind. The shouts of their hunters echoed, growing louder with every heartbeat. The chase was far from over, and Ethan knew the next few days might decide whether they lived or died. The canyon twisted like a giant scar through the rocky land. Ethan and Lyra ran along its narrow floor, their footsteps echoing off the high stone walls. The sunlight above flickered as enemy ships passed overhead. Casting fast-moving shadows across the rock, the air was hot and dry. The kind that made every breath feel heavy. Ethan's legs burned, but he forced himself to keep pace with her. We can't outrun ships, Ethan gasped. No, Lyra replied calmly. But we can make them fight us where we choose. Her voice was steady, but her eyes scanned every rock and shadow. She was already planning the next move. Ethan realized then she wasn't just running blindly. Every step, every turn, had purpose. The canyon narrowed even further until the walls pressed close like a stone throat. This is it, Lyra said. Stopping suddenly, she crouched behind a cluster of jagged rocks, motioning for Ethan to do the same. They will have to come through here, she explained. They can't fly in this narrow space, and their numbers won't help them. Ethan checked the weapon she had given him. His hands were trembling. What if I miss? He asked quietly. Then I will not, Lyra answered, her tone leaving no room for doubt. Her confidence was unsettling and comforting at the same time. The distant hum of engines grew louder. Dust drifted from the canyon walls as vibrations shook the ground. They're close, Ethan whispered. Yes, Lyra said. This will be our stand. She drew her curved blade, its edge catching the sunlight. Ethan gripped his weapon tighter, pressing his back against the rock. The first mercenary appeared around the bend, moving cautiously. Lyra waited, still as a statue. When he stepped into the narrowest part of the pass, she exploded into motion. Her blade struck before he could fire, sending his rifle clattering. To the ground, Ethan fired at the second mercenary behind him. The blast caught the man in the chest plate, knocking him backward. More came, their shouts echoing in the canyon. Energy bolts sizzled through the air, burning small craters into the stone. Ethan ducked low, returning fire. Lyra weaved through the attackers like silver lightning. Her strikes were precise, each movement a mix of speed and strength. Ethan realized she wasn't just fighting to protect herself, she was making sure no one got near him. A mercenary lunged from the side, nearly catching Ethan off guard. Lyra's blade intercepted at the last second. The sound of metal scraping echoed sharply before she sent the man sprawling. You're getting distracted, she warned without looking back. Ethan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. Every time he aimed, he pictured what would happen if he missed. Both of them would be dead. Minutes felt like hours. The canyon floor was littered with broken weapons and groaning bodies. But the enemy wasn't done. A deep, metallic clank echoed from above. Ethan looked up just in time to see a heavy assault droid dropping from the cliff. It landed with a ground-shaking thud, its twin cannons locking onto them. "Cover me, Lyra!" shouted. She darted forward, moving too fast for the droid's targeting system to keep up. Ethan fired at the joints in its legs, sparks flying as metal bent under the impact. The droid swiveled toward him, forcing Lyra to leap onto its back. With a single strike, she drove her blade deep into its power core. The Machine shuddered, then collapsed in a heap of smoke and metal. Ethan stared at the wreck, his chest heaving. That was insane, he said. Lyra stepped down from the droid, breathing lightly as if it were nothing. This is what it means to be bound, she said softly. You fight. I fight, you fall. I fall. Her words weren't just a reminder. They were a promise. For a moment, the canyon was silent, except for the wind. Ethan felt an odd mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. He had fought alongside her now, not just hiding behind her skill. And he knew their bond was no longer just something. She claimed it was real. He didn't want to admit it out loud, but part of him was starting to trust her completely. Then the silence broke. From far down the canyon, more voices echoed. Lyra's head snapped toward the sound. They are regrouping, she said. We can't stay here. She led him up a narrow ledge, climbing quickly despite the steep angle. Ethan followed, his fingers scraping against sharp stone. They reached the top of the canyon, where the land stretched into rolling hills. The air felt cooler here, carrying the scent of distant rain. In the far distance, Ethan saw the faint shimmer of something massive like a wall of light. What's that? He asked the outer veil of the sanctuary. Lyra replied, We're closer than I thought. But her voice didn't hold relief. Instead, she scanned the horizon with narrowed eyes. They know where we're going now, she said. They'll try to cut us off before we reach it. Ethan's stomach sank. So, another fight. Yes, she said without hesitation. And it will be worse than this. Ethan glanced at her. Then, I guess we keep going, he said quietly. Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time since they met, she smiled. Yes, she agreed. Together, and with that, they began moving toward the sanctuary, unaware of the larger force already setting the trap ahead. The hills rolled out before them, like a sea of green and stone. The air was cooler here, but the wind carried a distant rumble. Ethan glanced back and saw faint dust clouds rising on the horizon. They're still coming, he said. Lyra didn't look back. They won't stop, she replied. Not until they have you. The shimmering veil of the sanctuary was closer now. It rose like a wall of light against the sky. Faint but steady. Ethan could feel a strange hum in the air as they approached. It was as if the ground itself recognized where they were going. Lyra slowed her pace, scanning the ridges ahead. They'll try to block the entrance. She said quietly, They'll wait until you are close enough to see safety. Then take it away. Ethan frowned. Then we need another way in. There is only one gate, she said, and they know it. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She was already thinking of what would happen next. Ethan could tell she wasn't expecting an easy path. They crossed a shallow stream, the cold water soaking into Ethan's boots. A hawk-like shadow passed overhead, and he froze. Lyra's gaze followed it to a cliff edge where figures stood watching. Mercenaries, at least a dozen, spreading out along the ridge. They've found us, Ethan whispered. Yes, Lyra said. And they are waiting for the others to close in. They pressed forward, but the ridge ahead narrowed into a rocky pass. At the far end, the mercenaries were already forming a line. Lyra stopped and turned to Ethan. This is where you must decide, she said. Ethan blinked. Decide what? Whether you want to live as my bond, she answered, or break it now. He stared at her. Break it? You told me it can't be undone. It can, she said quietly, but only if I release you. Her silver eyes didn't waver. If I do, you can run on your own, and maybe they will not kill you, and you. Ethan asked, I will. Fight them until I fall, she said simply. The thought twisted in his chest. You'd die just to buy me time. It is the bond, she said, but it does not have to be your burden. Ethan felt the weight of the choice pressing down. On him, he could save himself. Maybe. But the image of her standing alone against dozens of enemies made his stomach churn. Before he could answer, The sound of engines roared from behind. The rest of the mercenaries were closing in. The pass ahead was their only way through. Lyra stepped forward, her hand resting on her blade. "I will clear the way for you," she said. "You decide whether to follow." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. She moved before he could stop her. Silver light flashed as she rushed toward the line of mercenaries. Her movements were fluid and deadly, each strike knocking an enemy back or dropping them where they stood. Shouts echoed through the pass, the clash of metal and the crack of energy fire filling the air. Ethan stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then his decision was made. He charged forward, weapon ready. A mercenary aimed at Lyra's back, but Ethan fired first. The blast striking true. Lyra glanced at him over her shoulder, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You chose," she said. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "I'm not letting you fight this alone." They fought side by side. Ethan used the cover of rocks to pick off enemies while Lyra cut through their front line. The pass was chaos, heat, and the sharp scent of ozone from energy weapons. But slowly, they pushed forward. Each step brought them closer to the end of the pass and the sanctuary beyond. The last mercenary in their way tried to retreat. Lyra caught him by the collar, her blade at his throat. "Tell your commander," she said coldly, "if he wants this human, he will have to come himself." She shoved him away, letting him run. Then she turned to Ethan. "We have minutes before they regroup." They hurried through the last stretch. The shimmering wall of the sanctuary loomed above them. Now Ethan could feel a strange warmth radiating from it. "What happens when we go inside?" he asked. "No one can touch us," she said. "By law, by oath, by fear." Her voice softened slightly. "But if you cross with me, you stay bound to me forever." Ethan's breath caught. "This is the real choice, isn't it?" "Yes." Lyra said. "There is no going back from it." Behind them, the sound of pursuit was growing louder. The first shadows of mercenaries appeared at the mouth of the pass. Ethan looked at her, at the marks glowing on his arm, at the silver eyes that had been watching over him since the moment he woke. He stepped forward. "Then we go in together," he said. Lyra's expression didn't change, but he saw the faintest relief in her eyes. She took his hand, their marks glowing brighter, and together they stepped toward the veil. Just as the mercenaries behind them broke into a charge. The moment Ethan and Lyra stepped through the shimmering veil, the world changed. The hot wind and noise of battle vanished, replaced by a calm stillness. The air inside the sanctuary felt warmer, carrying a faint scent of flowers and clean rain. The light was softer here, as if the sun itself bent to the will of this place. Ethan turned to look back. The mercenaries had stopped at the veil. They stood only a few steps away, weapons ready, but none dared to cross. Some shouted threats, but their voices sounded muted. It was as if an invisible wall separated them from this side. Lyra stood still, watching them with an unblinking gaze. One of the mercenaries, a tall man in dark armor, stepped forward. "You can't hide forever," he called. Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "In here we can," she replied, her voice calm. The man spat on the ground and turned away, leading his men back toward the hills. Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of the last few days crashing into him. His legs felt weak, but he refused to sit. "Is it over?" he asked quietly. "For now," Lyra said. "But not forever." Ethan frowned. "Then what's the point of this place?" "It gives us time," she said simply. "And sometimes, time is enough to change the war." They began walking deeper into the sanctuary. The ground was covered in soft moss, and tall trees with silver leaves swayed gently in the wind. In the distance, Ethan saw structures unlike anything he had seen before, as a crystal and stone that seemed to grow from the earth itself. People moved among them, Malian figures of many shapes and sizes, but all carried themselves with the same quiet confidence. "This is the heart of my clan's territory," Lyra explained. "Only those under the bond may enter without challenge." Ethan's gaze returned to her. "So I'm part of your clan now." "Oh, yes," she said without hesitation. "You carry the mark. You carry the bond. You carry me." Her words made his chest tighten. He didn't know whether to feel honored or trapped. They reached a large open courtyard, where a group of armored figures waited. At their center stood a tall woman with hair even brighter than Lyra's. Her eyes, the same glowing silver, studied Ethan with interest. "Lyra," the woman said, her voice deep and commanding. "You have returned." "Yes, sister," Lyra replied, bowing her head slightly. "This is Ethan Cole, the one I was sent to protect." The woman's gaze sharpened. "So the human lives," she said. "And you still breathe, which means you have taken the vow." Ethan shifted uneasily under her stare. "I didn't exactly agree to it," he muttered. The woman smiled faintly. "Few ever do," she said. "But the bond chooses for us." She stepped closer, circling him slowly, as if weighing his worth. "You must understand, human," she said. "By our law, you are one of us. Now your victories, your enemies, are our enemies." Ethan swallowed hard. "And if I fail?" "Then she fails," the woman said, nodding toward Lyra. "And if she fails, she dies. And so do you." The truth hit him again like a heavy stone. He had chosen to step through the veil, but the choice carried a price. Still, when he looked at Lyra, he felt no regret. She had risked her life for him more than once, and now he realized he would do the same for her. The woman raised her voice so all could hear. "Let it be known, the bond between Lyra of the Silver Veil and Ethan Cole of Earth is sealed." The crystal towers around the courtyard shimmered faintly, as if echoing her words. Lyra stepped forward and stood beside him. Her silver eyes met his. "This is the custom fulfilled," she said softly. "I woke on you. I vowed to guard you. And now you stand in my world as my equal." Ethan felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just a man running for his life anymore. He was part of something larger, something older than he could fully understand. He looked at the sanctuary around them, the peace, the beauty, the strength, and knew it was worth fighting for, even if it meant never returning to the quiet life he once had. Later, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the valley, Ethan asked, "What happens now?" Lyra's gaze drifted to the horizon where the veil shimmered faintly. "Now," she said, "we prepare for the war." He asked, "For everything?" She replied, her hand brushed against his, and the marks on their arms glowed faintly. A silent reminder that whatever came next, they would face it together. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the cool sanctuary air fill his lungs. Somewhere beyond the hills, enemies were regrouping. But here, for this moment, he was safe. And more than that, he was no longer alone. The bond had brought him into danger. Yes, but it had also given him someone who would never leave his side. As the twin moons rose above the sanctuary, casting silver light across the trees, Ethan turned to Lyra. "I guess I'm stuck with you now," he said, with a faint smile. She tilted her head, her lips curling just slightly. "No," she said, "we are bound, not stuck." And for the first time since this all began, Ethan laughed. The sound carried through the quiet night, a promise that whatever came next, they would meet it together.